there. Welcome to the eLearning Champions Pod. I'm Shalini, your host for today, and I'm thrilled to have with us Sreekanth from. He's a seasoned and versatile HR professional with over 15 years of experience, and he excels in global HR strategies, leadership development, talent acquisition, change management, succession planning, employee relations, and the works. So, known for his dynamic communication skills, he thrives in fast paced settings and collaborates with leaders and stakeholders to achieve measurable results. So, once again, a very warm welcome to you, Srikanth. We are thrilled to have you with us today.
Thank you very much, Shalini. I think it's been a wonderful opportunity for me to be part of this podcast. And I'm excited too, and look
Thank
forward
you.
to have a lot of conversation.
Right. So, let's dive right in with our first question, uh, which is really a universal kind of question, which
Mhm.
every L&D professional faces. So, what challenges do you anticipate or do you face in implementing L&D programs? And well, how do you overcome them?
Mhm. Thanks for this question. I think it's very appropriate that we start with this very fundamental question, Shalini, because seldom we hear this question many a times from most of the L&D professionals.
Right.
My piece of take on this question is that the L&D basically, it's as a program, it comes with its fair share of challenges, but I see this as an opportunity to innovate. Uh, one big challenge is all about the engagement. How do you keep the entire session, or maybe probably the entire value chain, as engageful as possible? So that's the one big challenge for sure.
Right.
Second one, having the buy-in from the manager or maybe the respective leadership team, because
Right.
we doing anything without having them or having their buy-in or the conviction is something which is not going to yield a 360 view or a 360 betterment of the entire ecosystem. So that's my second point.
Right.
Third one, I also would say that the impact what we can create. So that's also often seen as a challenging one. It's not just about how we do or how we conduct this, interventions or the training program. It's also about what is the impact we can create out of this.
Right.
So, yeah, so these are my takes
Right.
on this.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing those. I'm sure every listener can relate to what you're saying. And it's interesting, you mentioned engagement all along the value chain, because sometimes as L&D professionals, we tend to focus overly on one particular group. We forget that the ecosystem is made up of all kinds of groups which significantly impact whatever we do. So that's really an excellent point, Shrikant. And yeah, couldn't agree with you more about the impact unless we have this buy-in from stakeholders and managers, that 360-degree view which you talked about. It's impossible. And I think then we end up working in a silo and in a glass bubble, and we assume that there is impact and we can't see the entire big picture. So that's a very pertinent point. Um,
Thank you, Chandra. Yeah.
so coming to the next question, Shrikant, what strategies do you employ to identify learning needs and tailor your learning solutions to meet these diverse requirements of employees?
Mm. Maybe I see two parts into this question. One is about what are the strategies which could probably help to identify the learning needs.
Yes,
Second one, once you have the strategy in it, how do you tailor that into the training solution to meet the diverse requirement?
right.
Um, right. So I try to keep my answer as bulletin as possible, so that it's easy also for the listeners and the
Yes,
viewers to follow and grasp it. Uh, to answer to the first half of the question in terms of what strategies do you employ to identify the learning needs, I think where do we start is basically about first understanding the skill gap, which is quite known as the competency mapping or the skill mapping. So you can
right,
probably start right from there. It could be perhaps in terms of use the performance review as your one of the tool, the feedback from the managers, and then also the assessments to identify the gaps. So this could be the one way. The second one could be your good old methodology of going with the employee survey and the feedback, because that is where you understand the preferences and the career aspiration of the individuals.
Right.
Uh, uh, Finally, it's also about how do you map your training needs to your organizational priorities and the future skills. That's also something what you will have to probably keep it in back of your mind. That will help you to probably design the program in a very efficient way. Uh, the second part of the question about how do you tailor the training solution?
Srikant, before we go to that, I just wanted to dig a little deeper. So
Yeah.
you mentioned, the skill gap analysis, and do you follow any specific framework or a competency model, or, is there any favorite that
Yeah.
you have?
Yeah. Uh, what we do is, especially when it comes to skill mapping, we generally do this with the people from the manufacturing background. So the basic or the fundamental thing what we do, especially with the skill gapping, in terms of understanding what is the current level of the skill of an employee or the group of employees, and then we try to keep a benchmark. When it comes to keeping the benchmark, we take the input from the various sources to understand what could be the potential, the benchmark possible, and then we try to kind of do, assessment with these people, and then try to see where is the gap coming in from. So that's
Right.
on the skill side. And similarly with the competency model, so competency also more so for the staff category of the people, more or less we do the same methodology, but sometimes we also follow, let's say, the assessment center to understand the gap. Sometimes we also go with, let's say you have a proper defined job description available, and then you
Mhm.
try to kind of understand the psychometric part of the individual employee, and then you try to match what is required for the job to deliver, and then
Right.
what is the skill set and or the competency an individual employee has, maybe through the assessment centers or maybe through the 360 feedback again,
Right. Right.
and so on and so forth. So this will help us to gauge what kind of gaps we have, and that will help us to further build something into that direction.
Right.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you for that very comprehensive response. Yeah, please go ahead with the second part, which how do
yeah.
you tailor your solutions
Yeah.
accordingly?
So how do we tailor our solution? I think probably to start with, to keep this as interesting as possible, Shalini, here, that first and foremost thing, every L&D professional has to keep in mind that any solution what we try to give should always be aligned with the career growth of the individual or to the team or the organization. That's very given. That's the fundamental one. Because your career growth and the kind of training what you're trying to give cannot be in the silos, right? So it should be a marriage between both of these. Say, for example, as long as someone shows me the career growth by letting me or encouraging me to be a part of a training program, I see a clear connect.
Correct.
Versus you not showing me any career growth, and then you try to tell me that, Srikanth, you try to do this piece of training programs, or maybe
Right.
you attend this workshop. It's like a two different topics which runs always in parallel. So for me,
True.
of course, aligning the training with the career growth being the first point. Second one, it's also important that we personalize. It's not that the old methodology of, let's say some download some, inspirational videos. Let's do a role play. Let's do uh, kind of only the group discussions will only sufficient for the people. We have to make this a bit more personalized for our people. In terms of the experience, what one can get it. Okay, this is all about the experiential learning, and then maybe also something which is based out of the role and the goals, so that will help an individual to stick to it, that okay, well, this is something what I can probably groom myself further basis these training programs, and this is where I feel a value add to my career growth. So
Right.
the second point is all about personalizing your learning ones for me. And the third one is also, I think, something which I'm sure you will like this because it's about the mode of the training or maybe the formats, right? Now the attention span of the individuals has getting or maybe getting deteriorated year on year because of the social media, because of the lot of distractions what we have around us. So probably you need to have a great blend of the learnings, especially in the different formats of the learning. It could be a micro learning, it could be a nuggets, bit-sized learnings, e-learning modules, and of course, the techniques which are related to, let's say, on-the-job training and learn from the peer group, uh, mentoring, coaching. So these are some of the things which will really keep the people up for the learning and keep that, kind of starving towards, I want to learn something today. So
Right,
these are my
right.
takes, Shalini.
Right. Thank you. That's really interesting. And like you said, without tapping into the career aspirations, it becomes just a top-down, mandate. Okay, you have to take this training. But when you see how it fits into your overall, journey and your overall development, I think that's where the motivation really kicks in. Yeah. And of course, there are those typical trainings which, everybody needs just to be able to do their job. Something like an ERP training, for instance, some new software.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, that's very true. I think that's something where we as L&D professionals sometimes tend to, not emphasize as much the tying it to the career aspirations bit. And thank you for highlighting that. So I think in a sense, you've kind of already answered my next question, which was, can you describe your approach to designing and implementing effective L&D programs? But please feel free to dive in deeper. Maybe you could share an example of some innovative learning and development initiative that you were a part of, you implemented, or you're likely to implement, and what are the results achieved?
It's an interesting piece. Probably I can just refer to my experience, what I have had come across. Um, I think sometime back during my assignment with one of my previous organizations, uh, we have had this challenge of infant attrition, right?
Right,
When I say infant attrition, it is with respect to the people quitting the organization, leaving the organization within a span of, let's say, between 6 months to 1 year. So that's what we call it as an
right,
infant
right,
attrition. So, this is where you have to bring in your kind of, expertise as an L&D professional into the table that what kind of tailor-made solution could probably help you instead of, just following a good old methodology of, let's say, I give them some communication training or a soft skill training programs, which will may sound like quite absolute to the people. But then, as a learning and development professional, you have to tailor made the solution in such a way that it should really hit the nail. It should really be a solution to the problem what we have. So, refer to my experience, Shalini, what you asked about. Um, Again, as I was mentioning that we have had this infant attrition, and then it was me and my team who came together to understand what are some of the root cause of this infant, attrition happening, which is creating some turbulence in the entire, employee life or the employee
right,
culture within the organization.
right.
So we came up with a simple yet effective intervention called new manager assimilation.
Mhm.
So what does this mean? New manager assimilation basically to understand, to hear the feedback, to hear the opinion, to know about the pulse of these people during the early stage of their career.
Wonderful.
So this was the bottom line. How do you do that? Again, it was a very simple survey what we have had prepared. Survey having a couple of categories of the questions which addresses, say, for example, a category which starts from how was your onboarding experience to how
Right.
are you feeling? Are you able to really, set your goal right? And are you already aware of your deliverables, your KPIs? To also to an extent where you probably going to ask them that do you have an opportunity not just to take the feedback but also to give the feedback, So
Right.
that is the kind of a very tailor-made framework of the survey questionnaire is what we have had prepared. And then basis the outcome or the output of this particular survey, it was quite surprising for us to see that people have had a lot of challenges in terms of getting assimilated with the organization culture in the beginning. That is where you really need the help of the HR professionals or maybe the learning and development professionals to pitch in
Right.
and support the individual employees. So this was a clear hit for us. And then, so basis the outcome of this, we actually chalked out the plans in terms of not just giving the training or the support for our newcomers or the newbies, but also to go back and see what kind of organization culture we have. Do we need to do any course collection with the existing people, or do they need any support in terms of kind of allow them or let them to welcome the newbies into the organization, or maybe the
Right.
next generation of people to be a part of their the overall journey. So
Right.
this is one of the fantastic example what I always remember, Shalini. uh, this is the kind of tailor-made solution as an individual you really have to give, which will have an direct impact on the bottom line of the business.
Right. Right. That's a really great example, Srikanth. In fact, there was a time when we used to think that L&D plays a key role only in the skill development. Once the employees are fully into their jobs, then we develop and build their skills, upskill them, reskill them. But increasingly, I think we are all becoming increasingly aware that we play a critical role all through the employee life cycle. Right from onboarding, during the onboarding, and before the onboarding, preparing the managers, preparing, all kinds of target groups to uh, make the onboarding smooth, to welcome the employees, to make them, to assimilate them, as you said. I believe you used the word new manager assimilation. So I think that's really a critical component, and we found this, in our own experience in working with our client organizations. There was a lot of emphasis on equipping managers to be supportive of their team's learning, not just their performance, but also their team's learning goals. So that's really interesting how, this small but critical piece can pivot things around. And in your case, in the example, I think arrest that infant attrition.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's very heartening when you see such, visible results, because the impact is there for everyone to see. So I'm sure that was a highly satisfying example, and thank you so much for sharing that.
Pleasure, and thanks for asking that question. It was quite intriguing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how do you, coming back, I believe you mentioned a culture of learning, a culture of growth. How do you get those newbies into that learning culture? Stepping back, can you share something about, how do you foster a culture of learning and knowledge sharing among employees, so that you promote ongoing development and also collaboration?
It's a good piece of question again from you, Shalini. What we do is actually, I mean, in the earlier days, we used to call it as the HRD, Human Resource Development Department, which was exclusively meant only for the development of the people, only for the traditional way of, giving the training and so on and so forth. But then now, what is happening in the market or as a part of the trend is that people do not want learning or maybe a training as an additional topic, uh, you know, uh, additional topic to be a part of their plate when they already have so much of things.
Right, right,
So that is where the role of an HR, role of an L&D professional to make the learning as a lifelong learning. So that's the culture what you probably have to inculcate in the minds of the people. So that's the first thing. So when
right,
you know about what you want to do, when you know about how do you make the lifelong learning as a culture of the organization, there comes your roadmap. There comes your mission into picture. The first and foremost thing is that you have to make the learning as a part of their routine. It's not that a kind of thing where, okay, on one fine Wednesday or one fine Thursday, there is a half a day program available. You will have to go and attend. So
Right.
gone are those days, right? You will
Right.
have to inculcate that culture where people can really, refresh their knowledge maybe once in a day for about a couple of minutes as a part of their lifelong learning.
Right.
Second, I see the role of the leaders plays a very pivotal role here because the leaders are the one who should champion the learning by actively participating and sharing the insights.
Right.
Uh, that is where you can also draw your inspiration from because we have great leaders in the history and also present uh, who have lived leaps and bounds when it comes to the topic of learning. So
Right.
you can, one, of course, draw the inspiration from there. Second, you can also look up to your leaders within the organization. Third one, I would say the peer learning or knowledge sharing, community of the practices. It's more on the internal knowledge sharing platforms, which would definitely help you to kind of keep that momentum on in terms of continuous learning rather than making it as an silo here. I would like to talk about one of the interesting story when it comes to the peer learning. With my current organization, we have something called failure diaries. Uh, so basically,
Wow.
what we do is exactly.
I've heard of
So
growth diaries. This is a new one. Sounds interesting.
yeah. So because I mean, if you look at India or Asia as a culture, we belong to a culture where we do not encourage the failures. We consider
Right.
failures always as the end, right? So this is the kind of the culture what we are into. But then what I strongly believe is failure is just a postponement of your success. That's all. Maybe instead of you embracing the success today, you are just keeping a little more time for you to bounce back and be more
Right.
stronger to embrace the success. So we have had started this journey called Failure Diaries, where probably an individual tries to kind of share the failure, and more than sharing the failure, it's about what is that learning you have had out of the failure,
Right.
because we all of us do not have or do not live for such a long time to learn from our own mistakes, right? So so you
True.
always, out of 60, 70 years of your
Yeah.
probable expected age,
Yeah.
you have to learn from others mistakes. So this is also something very interesting one what we have started. It's been a fantastic response from the people as well.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
can imagine because, like you said, we don't have time to make all our mistakes.
Yeah.
So just learning from others, and especially if people are willing to be vulnerable enough to share about, their failures. So I'm very curious, Shrikant, how did you get people to start sharing? Because, like you said, especially in Asian cultures,
Yeah.
it can be seen as something, one wouldn't want to put out there. So how did
Yeah.
you overcome that initial, was there resistance to this? And how did you overcome that initial resistance,
Yeah.
if any?
Yeah. So good. Again, it's an intriguing point for me. I think definitely it's not something where you welcome to share. Even consider this example. We always try to point out the success of an individual rather than the failure. So that is where our minds are also tuned to always talk about
Correct.
the positives rather than about reflecting on your learnings out of the failures. This
Right.
goes also a bit in the direction of your fixed mindset versus growth mindset. I think
Right.
we have had initially some of the challenges in terms of making people share their experience on the other side
Mhm.
of the coin. But then I think the role of the L&D professional is something which really matters the most over there, because we have to create that psychological safety for the people
Absolutely.
and tell them that, look, this is not something what we are trying to project or brand your failures, but then we want the rest of the people or maybe your own good colleagues or the peers to learn from your mistakes so that they will not commit the same mistake tomorrow. So then they could
Right.
probably get an opportunity to learn from your mistake, and then you could be the role model for the others not to do the same mistake, right?
Right.
So when you able to establish or when you able to set that right context in, I think that's more than enough for you. One, Shalini. Second one, we always ask our people to be as curious as possible.
Right.
Uh, you know, no one knows everything, but everyone knows something. So what a fantastic anecdote it is. I get to come across about this some time ago. You Not everybody around us knows everything, but probably every one of us have some knowledge, something you can probably learn
Absolutely.
from, that will really help you to learn and make your journey as fulfilling as possible, as rich as
Right.
possible. So as long as you can make that context right and create that psychological safety, I think it is you are there.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, is this like some how do you implement this? This failure diaries, did you say? Yeah, failure diaries. So do you go department wise, or is it once a year kind of a thing where people really who are willing to share about it, or do you do it within the communities of practice? Just intrigued.
Yeah. I think first thing first, what we want to do is that what we wanted to do is that we wanted to keep this as a closer community as possible, just to give
Right.
that flair, just to make sure that people do not take this other way around.
Correct.
That particular, I mean, we completely went with the volunteering instead of kind of taking the entire department together, and we say that okay, you talk about your story of failure.
Yeah, it goes against it's so
Exactly.
self-defeating if you do that. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but you know what? To our surprise, we have had really people who says or who said that yes, I mean, why not? Uh, I would probably share with you something what I have come across during, let's say, execution of a project, or let's say maybe during one of the negotiations with the customer, or maybe when you are actually doing some accounting. What could be
Right.
the challenges you have come across. So we actually compiled all those volunteers first to have them in and on board and tell them the purpose, because that makes everything clear. So the purpose, we made it quite clear, and then kind of explained them that this is what the whole goal of our initiative, and this is where we can learn from each other and grow. So
Right.
this is how we started, Shalini.
Wow. Fantastic, really. And that gives you so many rich insights into future L&D initiatives too. It
Yeah.
informs your decisions because if you find enough number of people struggling in one area, then you can get a clear road ahead for that. So I'm sure this serves many purposes, and it's fantastic how you've nurtured and built this culture of learning. And I really like what you said about curiosity because unless you're curious, you wouldn't want to know anything.
Yeah.
And you don't want to know anything, you're exactly where you are, say, 10 years back. So that's great. I was just reading about the most in-demand skills today. I think it was a workplace LinkedIn report, or I forget the
Mhm.
name of the report, but learning agility is one of the top skills. And that is something, every employer is also looking at increasingly, even when I'm sure even in the recruitment, in the interviews and so on, people try to find out whether this person has that sense of wonder and that drive to learn and thereby to perform. So it's wonderful how, your culture is shaped by these. So curious, Arshika, how closely does L&D work with, of course, we co-own a lot of things, HR and L&D, we co-own, and we are increasingly co-owning a lot of things in the present scenario, in the present landscape. But how closely do you work with your L&D?
I think more than about working closely, it's your own family, right? I do not see this to be the two different verticals. This is where I come from. I think L&D as an sub-function or a vertical is the most important, the member of the HR family. This is how I see. And our interaction within the HR or within the HR as a function is just on a day-to-day basis. Just on a day-to-day basis. I mean, we always sound, we always kind of have the exchange, and we always see that, the non-L&D team as kind of, the sounding partner for us in terms of helping us design and develop the overall framework of the L&D, Shalini.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Sreekanth. You've shared some very
I,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
please go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. I mean, since you mentioned about the curiosities a while ago, I think this also reminds me that, I mean, since we also hear, or maybe the attention span of the people is so less that even when we are sit across to watch a movie, you probably will be, doing dual things at a moment. You may be
Right.
watching a movie and you will also just scrolling or flipping the, Insta reels. So that's
True,
why it's
true,
called
true.
childlike curiosity, right? So I just
Yes.
refer back to my son, who he's a 8-year little school going boy. So he always asks me questions, no matter what it is, whenever there is a conversation which is being happening between me and my wife, he always has something to ask me. So that's the kind of curiosity. But
Yeah.
we, again, in our culture, we do not encourage people asking you a question. It's been viewed as arrogance. It's been viewed as, well, you sound to be a person with the attitude, and
Yeah.
not something which is very welcoming. I think it's very important as a part of our
Absolutely.
lifelong learning, keeping that curiosity that can really make you a lifelong learner. So this is something what I just
Yeah.
wanted to also share
Thank
it with
you.
all
Thank
my
you,
colleagues.
Srikanth.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more because I totally agree. Even about this aspect of where, culturally, we don't really encourage too much of it.
Yeah.
But that's the only thing which will make you learn. And we have a tendency sometimes to, say, you ask too many questions. But it's when you ask those questions that you're actually looking to learn, to find answers. So I think that's a very key trait for a lifelong learner. So thank you for highlighting that. Coming to the measurement of L&D programs, how do you measure the success and the impact of these programs?
Mhm. I think that's yet another very, very more often, I would say, one of the most asked questions for any L&D professionals, that
Yeah.
how do you create the impact? How do you measure? How can you make
Yes.
the results to be as tangible as possible?
Right.
Um, I think probably I just start with this example, Shalini. Again, refer back to what I mentioned about we having various interventions, various training programs. This reminds me of one of our initiatives, something called the First Time People Leaders, right?
Hmm.
So, so you have a group of people from coming from the different functions who are becoming the first time people leader in their career, right?
Right.
So, and then you obviously come across a lot of people related challenges, a lot of managing the performance, driving the results kind of topics where you see some friction between the new people leader and the team. So
Right.
it's always been a question to the entire learning and development department, that how do you balance, or what do you do for such kind of situations, or for such kind of first time people leaders. And then came this particular solution, what we actually custom made, that we have first understood that what are the expectation of the bosses or the managers of this first time people leader, and second, understanding the expectation from the peer, third one from the subordinates. So there is
Yeah.
more or less a kind of 270 or a 180-degree feedback. We understood what are some of the things which is required for you to be a successful people person first time. It
Right.
could be driving self, driving the team, and driving the organization. So these are the three
Right.
different angles at which we have looked at. And we really, custom made the complete program, which has resulted almost, I would say, more than 90% of the participants coming out to be more confident and, managing the teams better. At the same time, the employee engagement score of those respective teams, I also see some visible improvement, and which is also resulted in a better attrition within the team. So what am I trying to say is that these are the results, the measures, what I come across when we implemented this particular initiative. So the message to the community is that always keep the immediate feedback soon after you complete any training program. Try to take the feedback, because as long as they are there in the session or soon after the session, you get the real feedback. Do
Correct.
not take it after a week or a month or so. It is not going to help you. And then
Right.
second one, the knowledge retention and the skill application. There are various methods which I do not want to talk, starting from the
Yeah.
Kirkpatrick method of
Right. Right.
measurement to anything, you can probably do,
Mm.
like, let's say, going to the managers, understanding or taking the feedback. There are methodologies. It will one of the way also to understand, I mean, one of the way as an indication to your effectiveness of the learning and development is the retention of the employees and the career growth, right? No
Right.
matter what we do, if you do not have a direct impact or a contribution to the retention of the employee, then all our L&D programs are of no great value add. So that's
Right.
why that's also one of the indication. As long as you see people are really retaining and they are kind of glooming further within the organization, that's also your one of the measurement criteria to see
Right.
that all the L&D topics or all the L&D interventions what we are doing is yielding the results. So this is
Right.
how I feel and believe in, Shalini.
Yeah. Thank you, Srikanth. Very, you've nailed it. It's actually sometimes we get too much into, the data part, but there are some simple measures which we can really see very tangibly, even without going into Kirkpatrick level 4 or level 5, which sometimes we may not even have the budget to do. But this aspect you touched upon of, just having the employee retention and seeing them uh, investing in their future within the company, growing, wanting to grow, and doing the hard work required through upskilling themselves. I think, yeah, that's something that we really should be looking at very closely. So, coming to my next question, we live in a very exciting stage, with technology changing overnight. The landscape is evolving like never before, especially with AI tools and AI technologies, and being at the in the center of everything that we do. So, in what ways, Srikanth, do you perceive or do you foresee AI tools and shaping the future of workplace learning?
I was just wondering why this question is still not being asked. Thank you for this question. I think I would like to start with the statement that everyone have this myth in the mind, but the reality is that AI will not replace you. I think you will be replaced by the person who knows AI.
Yeah, yeah,
So you should know about that. So if you do not learn AI, then probably somebody else who will learn about the AI, and then that person could probably replace you. So that's very
right,
clear. Coming to the use of AI in the L&D space is huge. Starting from having your data-driven decision making in L&D to as easy as developing or designing a content, or maybe you call it as a content creation. So the
right,
role of AI is phenomenal.
right,
As long as you as an individual, you as a learning development professional, you know about how do you use all the technologies which are around you, not just confined only to the AI, but it could perhaps be anything, any technology. I think that's where your edge is. Let's
right,
assume for a minute you are able to design a training program, let's say on the conflict management. And if you are so tech savvy that you always go and visit always go and visit, especially the LinkedIn, a lot of stories. There are a lot of contents which you can probably see on the LinkedIn, which talks about some of the examples, some of the cool tools about the conflict management, right? So that is how you can probably learn from. You don't have to every time go and refer to a textbook, every time go and ask somebody,
Right.
every time you hit the Google. So now the information is available abundantly across you, and then I mean, sky is the limit as long as you are a tech savvy. One,
Yeah.
of course, we have a big brother, AI, you can always go and refer to. But then it also goes a bit of in direction that what are the different platforms you can use it.
Right.
Right? So
Right.
I definitely see the role of an AI is very instrumental. And I mean, you cannot resist this. You have to embrace the role of the AI in your learning and development topics.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as you said, when you know how to use the AI, then that's something that no one can take away from you. That becomes your superpower. A superpower, a power user of AI is more likely to be, to grow and make a bigger impact. Um, thank you so much, Shrikant. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. Before we wind up this session, I have one final question. What advice can you share with L&D professionals who want to grow their career? I believe you've partly answered it because, in the previous exam question, you did say, go out there, look at what's there, learn, don't wait for a formal training. But I'll just leave the question open again.
Yeah. I think it's been now for me a journey of the last 15 plus years. Yes, of course, for the first few years, only into L&D, and then later I also have broadened the horizon from the L&D to the other topics like talent management, and talent acquisition, and the overall HR as a strategy. Especially when it comes to the professionals who are into the L&D space, I always say that be a business partner, not just a trainer. Very clear. You are not meant to be a trainer, but you are a business partner.
Right.
You have to enable the business as a trainer. You are not a supporting vertical, but you are an enabling vertical. Second, stay business focused. Anything and everything you try to do should always align with the organization goal, which
Absolutely.
drives the
Absolutely.
impact. Second message. Third message is that try to embrace the technology. This is very, very crucial. Leverage this AI today, the digital learning, data analytics, to give that learning experience to the people, right? So, third
Right.
message is embrace the technology. The fourth one is measure and showcase the impact. I think it's very important. It's the need of the hour. People will stop telling you that L&D is just another cost center. No, it's
Right.
not just a cost center. We are actually enabling the people, and you can clearly demonstrate the ROI, the return on investment to the business. So that is where people start respecting you and consider L&D to be another serious business. So I think these are
Right.
four messages, Shalini. I firmly believe be a business partner, stay focused, business focused, embrace the technology, and measure and showcase the impact. So these are the four message which I would like to share it with all my L&D friends and the professionals.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Shrikant. Uh, you put it together so neatly and so concisely. It's so easy for us to remember what all you've shared. And I think the banner behind you says it all. Make your impact.
Yes.
And thank you for sharing all those wonderful insights and some best practices from your experience. It's been truly a pleasure having you, and I'm sure our listeners have thoroughly enjoyed listening to this because you've really gone into the practicalities, of each of these challenges that we face and given us a lot of things to think about. So thank you once again. It was a joy having you.
Yeah. Pleasure.
And
It's been very pleasure.
thank you.
Thanks for
And
refreshing my knowledge too.
thank you. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Do stay tuned in for our future podcasts as well. Thank you.
Thank you.